Now I'd like to introduce you to today's presenter, Sherry Weppel. Sherry is the Director of Training and E-Learning Development at G2 Strategies. She has over 15 years experience designing, developing, and delivering interactive computer-based and web-based learning modules. Her role is to drive innovative ISD techniques into the processes and provide valuable input on the state of learning and best-in-class practices. Sherry recently completed her MS in Learning Sciences and Technology with a focus in gaming for instruction at Lehigh University. She also has earned an MS in Instructional Design and Development from Lehigh University and a BS in Art Education from Kutztown University. With that, Sherry, I'd like to turn the session over to you.
Thank you so much. And to all of you, the one thing that wasn't mentioned in my bio is that I'm trying to get over laryngitis, so I apologize for the status of my voice, but we'll try and get through the next 20 minutes as best as we can. One of the questions that we often get answered is around mobile training. A lot of times when we're talking about mobile training, there's two different strategies that we talk about. The first strategy is in how you actually deploy that training. So are you using a SharePoint site? Are you using an app? Are you using an LMS to be able to do that? And that's really one of the most critical paths in designing a mobile instruction. But today what we're going to focus on is how to actually reach your learner, how you want to be able to work with them. So there's a poll on the screen, and we want to get some thoughts from you. Is how are you consuming mobile content right now? So are you using a computer and a phone? Are you using a computer and a tablet? Are you using all three types of devices? Or are you only using a phone and a tablet? And this helps us frame up how we want to position our content and what tools are going to be best for you. One of the challenges that I think a lot of organizations have is that they use a bring your own device philosophy, in that any person in their organization can actually bring their own tablet, can bring their own phone or what have you, and we need to be able to provide content that's going to meet their needs in that device. So the poll has elapsed, so we're going to see the results in a minute. But that's one of the things that we want to think about, and one of the very first questions that you need to ask when you're starting to go mobile is how are your users going to consume this knowledge? Now there are some organizations that will actually give their learners a tablet, and then that makes it a lot easier from an organization that's deploying the content. But when you do have bring your own device, and it looks like quite a bit of you do, about 52%, are looking at a computer, a phone, and a tablet, which points to this is probably a bring your own device type of environment. Now luckily today we do have a lot of solutions that can meet the needs for that, and so let's get started. What we're going to discuss today is how to reach your learner, and that reach is actually an acronym. We want to talk about how we're going to get this content to the learners. You know, it used to be a lot simpler getting content to learners. We used to be able to just click on the course in the LMS, it loads on the company-provided computer, and everything's fine. Now we have a little bit more of a challenge that we have to work through. So as we look at the reach, let's look at each of those words, each of those letters, and start to dive into the equation. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to research your options. The next thing that you want to do is you want to evaluate your top picks. Then you want to adopt a solution strategy, communicate the direction, and then you're going to help align the business. And what we're going to do is we're going to go over each of those bullets today in greater detail. So from a research standpoint, as I said before, there's a lot of other things that you need to consider from the standpoint of how you're going to deploy this content and how you're actually going to get it to the learner. We're not going to dive into that deep today because that's really a big decision that takes your IT department and a lot of other people in your organization to decide how that's going to work best for you. I actually have an older blog post that we talk about those strategies in a little bit more detail. Today what we're going to talk about is actually how we're creating the content. So we want to talk about the fact that when you're creating content, you want to be able to create for all three platforms. So a lot of you mentioned the fact that you're currently using a desktop, you're using a phone, and you're using a tablet. So you want to be able to create something once and have it be reusable across the different platforms. Based on our research and based on our experience, the top pick for actual development of course software is the Articulate Suite. It's a commercial off-the-shelf product. Always like to recommend things that are off-the-shelf because that means that you're empowered as an organization to be able to maintain that content if you need to. I always caution anybody with using non-off-the-shelf products because it can get you into a little bit of trouble and a little bit of pain later on down the road if you want to be able to edit that content. Somebody may have used a proprietary library, they may have used proprietary software or coding that winds up being really complicated to be able to edit in the future. And I know that firsthand because we've had to edit that kind of content in the past. Articulate Presenter and Articulate Storyline come from the same company, but they're a little bit different. So the Articulate Presenter is going to be something where you're going to be able to use PowerPoint as your base. It's really, I think we're all kind of familiar with this software. It's the click next to continue. It has some great engage elements in it for interactivity. It has assessments in it. It's really your straightforward, basic type of e-learning. You can do some branching in it. You can do some more complicated actions, but if you're looking to do things that are complex, Articulate Storyline is your choice. Articulate Storyline does a great job of giving you a lot of the flexibility that Flash did without having to worry about how you deploy Flash content on a mobile device. So with that, you can have characters, you can have a completely customized interface. If you haven't tried Storyline 2 yet, it's absolutely amazing from a standpoint of usability. I actually picked it up and learned it within a day and was even able to do some of the really complex coding that comes with it. They really make it a very easy to use type of software. So you can see on the screen there's some benefits. The biggest benefit from this tool is that they have an app. And what the app does is it controls that user experience. So the users, as long as they launch it within the app, are going to see the same thing if they're on a Droid, if they're on an iPad, if they're on a desktop computer. You produce a course once, and it's going to serve up that content in whatever format that learner needs. So if they're on a desktop computer, they'll serve it up in Flash. If they're on a mobile device, they'll serve it up in HTML5. And they'll make sure that it looks right for whatever the resolution is that the learner is trying to look at. Now, I don't want to leave anybody out, so there are a lot of runner-ups from our top picks. So Adobe Presenter also is now available in desktop and mobile. Adobe Captivate is also available in desktop and mobile. Lectora is an HTML-based solution, so it's strict HTML. And then you can also create an app and have that available on the App Store via Google Play. There's lots of benefits and cautions with these. A lot of these programs may be a little bit more complicated. They may be a little bit more limiting, which is maybe why they weren't the top picks. But they certainly are options that you can pursue. And we give you the recommendation of experimenting with free trials of these types of software to see which one's going to work best in your organization. Because every organization is a little bit different. And so you need to do your research and figure out what's going to work best for you. So that's really your first step. We encourage organizations to try things out, see how they work, and then move on to the next step. So your next step is to really evaluate what your solutions are. So you want to start to evaluate from a size perspective of course files. Are these courses these big, huge courses that are then cumbersome to be able to maintain? So that's what I'm talking about from a small, medium, and large perspective. And also from a time perspective of how long does it take to create a course. You want to use a tool that gives you a lot of speed, and you want to use a tool that's going to give you a very light solution so that it's not something that's heavy on bandwidth. You also then want to kind of run through a technical checklist. As you're working with these different solutions, make sure that it bookmarks on your LMS, make sure that it bookmarks on your computers, make sure that it passes completion. Make sure that it has all the hooks and is very compatible easily without any kind of custom coding with your LMS or the system that you're using. So it's really something to test out before you adopt anything. Run these kinds of tests and make sure that you're going to be successful because it saves you loads of time in the long run. Next, you want to check out all the types of interactions that you have. So for example, you want to make sure that your audio plays. On certain devices, only one audio clip will play at a time. On other devices, it will actually allow you to have multiple audio clips on a page. Make sure that all your click-based interactions are going to work. Make sure that everything is a seamless experience and a good experience for the learner. It's everything from looking at how the experience is from a video file perspective, looking at how your text displays, and testing it on different devices, different operating systems, and that's really that last phase of making sure that you're testing on Firefox, IE, and Chrome, making sure that you're testing on Apple, Windows, BlackBerry, Android, whatever the different devices are that are going to apply to you. You want to do these tests, and you want to test as many different versions of the operating systems as well, particularly on the mobile devices because it changes quite frequently. Again, this is one of the benefits of using a tool that comes with its own app, is that let that be that company's problem to be able to troubleshoot that. They will confirm what devices, what operating systems it works for, and that takes a lot of the guesswork out for you. So all you then have to do is make sure that your employees download the app to play the courses through, and then you can focus on creating that course content or working with people like GP Strategies to create that course content. After you do your evaluation, you're going to want to adopt. So you're going to want to make a choice, and you're going to want to choose which of the programs you want to work with and be able to kind of show some proof of concept. So from an adoption standpoint, I don't consider this to just be, I'm going to make a choice and we're going to just go with that. What we typically recommend from an adoption standpoint is pick a couple of your key players. You know, the people in your organization who are always really forward-thinking. They're the ones who are trying to do things on the cutting edge. And pick some pilot projects that have a high reach within your organization. So something where maybe it has to go out to all employees, maybe it's something that's new, and start trying out your mobile solutions with that. Make sure you leave yourself enough time for testing, make sure you leave yourself enough time to make it successful, but allow that proof of concept to be your communication. So that people are starting to see, this is what mobile looks like, this is what good looks like, this is what we should be doing from a mobile experience, and these are the players that you need to talk to when you have questions about wanting to create mobile content. So once you decide this is what you're going to do, this is the program that you're going to use, this is the style guide that you're going to use with your course content, the next step is going to be to communicate. So from a mobile standpoint, communication is key. If you don't properly communicate and you don't properly have the plans in place and the style guides in place and your selections and constraints in place, then you can run into what I refer to that I see all the time in organizations, which is app confusion. If you don't have a clear plan in place, what's going to happen is the different pockets of your organization or the different people in your organization are going to go rogue. You know, they're going to want things to be mobile. They're going to want to do whatever they can to get things to be mobile. So all of a sudden you'll have a bunch of different apps being developed. You know, people in your organization will have devices that have 5, 6, 10, 15 different apps that might be available to them, and they're not going to know where to go for information. You know, all of a sudden you're going to have a bunch of different software programs being used. There's not going to be consistency. So communication becomes really key in making sure that this is successful. So as you communicate, think about doing lunch and learns. Think about having lunch and learns from the standpoint of showing how things are done, talking about constraints, being able to answer people's questions, and start small with those lunch and learns. So maybe pick people from your different divisions, people from different pockets of your organization. If you have a learning and development team, start with the learning and development team, but start to communicate that message out. Also think about using social media. So, you know, one thing that GP actually did, I believe it was last week from our marketing team, is we actually put out a module that was created in Storyline. You know, think about using social media to deploy to either your internal organization on Yammer or outside your organization, using some of these mobile tools to talk about what mobile is, why we're going mobile, what should be mobile, what shouldn't be mobile. Make sure that you're using examples. So from the example standpoint, this is where you can pick those hallmark courses, those compliance courses, maybe you know, any other kind of course that people are going to see that's going to have a high level of visibility to really show and exemplify what you're looking to do from a mobile standpoint. And last, you know, remember to communicate in person. You know, there's nothing to be shy about, to be talking to different people, pulling people together, doing some road shows, because, you know, oftentimes, you know, I think we get a little lazy every once in a while, and we think that email's good, phone's good, we can just stick with that. You know, and that's really not the case. I think that in-person can do a lot of different things that email and social media might not be able to. And the last thing is make sure that you have help. You know, help is going to come in the format of, you know, how to use the different software, how to troubleshoot the different software. The biggest help from a mobile standpoint is that style guide. So when do you go mobile? When do you not go mobile? You know, things like, you know, when we use different software tools, you know, when you use Articulate Presenter versus Articulate Storyline, how you set up the screen, what type of navigational buttons to use, you know, a lot of the good best practices that we know from an e-learning perspective. We need to reestablish all of that from a mobile standpoint. A lot of the things that were good in e-learning are not necessarily the same case from a mobile standpoint. You know, where we may have had standards in e-learning that 20 to 30 minutes is a good standard from a duration of an e-learning course. We now need to start looking at a little bit shorter durations. We want to look at maybe 10, 15 minutes. And even that's a bit long to be on a mobile device. So we want to start looking at shorter bursts of learning instead. But you want to make sure that you're working closely with your IT department. You want to make sure that you're collaborating a lot with them, because they're going to be a part of that critical path as they put out new devices, as they put out new operating systems, new browsers, making sure that what you're producing is going to be compliant with that, because mobile changes much, much faster than I think anything we've done before. So again, our key takeaways as we go through how to reach our learners is we want to make sure that we research our options. So giving you some samples of some of the research that we've done, but make sure that you're doing your own research as well. You know, for example, you may be on a Mac. You know, your entire company may be on a Macintosh computer. Articulate Storyline and Articulate are only with Windows-based environments. So it doesn't mean that you can't use it. It just means you'll have to research using a virtual machine to be able to do that. But you want to be able to test out your own options and make sure that whatever you're choosing is going to be the right choice for you. As you get down to the best in class or the best three choices, then you're going to want to evaluate those potential solutions. And don't just do like a little demo module, but actually use real content, use real information, use real narration, go with a full solution so that you can evaluate not only how to create that content, but also you can go through and you can talk about how the learner experience is. You can do some end-of-course surveys for everything from how they actually liked the content to also how they're able to interact with the LMS and how they're able to get that information and what that whole end-to-end experience was like. As we talk about adoption, we want to appeal to those people in our organization who are the kind of on that cutting edge, they're your early adopters, and we want to get them to adopt what the learning strategy is and be on board, because that's going to provide you consistency across your organization. Lastly, you want to communicate your strategy. So once you have those early adopters on board, let them be your mouthpiece. Let them help you communicate what the strategy is, communicate that through words, communicate that through social media. Communicate that through different means of just setting a good example and providing that good example consistently across your organization. And then finally, what you want to be able to do is to help your learners. So make sure that you're developing Q&A guides, make sure that you're developing a SharePoint site, make sure that you're doing all sorts of things to be able to provide them with the assistance that they're going to need to be successful. A lot of these software packages, you know, Articulate in particular, have really good help guides online. Lots of the programs like Adobe and a lot of the other companies are putting together screencasts or on YouTube where they can walk you through how to do something. So, you know, technology has become a lot easier than it used to maybe be in the past. You know, you're not given that big, huge, healthy manual to be able to walk through. A lot of things are just a quick Google search away. That being said, you want to make sure that you're putting those standards and conventions in place that are going to make everybody be successful. So I know 20 minutes goes by super, super fast, or at least it feels like it goes by really fast for me. But before we go, I do want to answer some questions. If you have some other questions, feel free to add them to the Q&A panel in the WebEx. So I'm going to start with, and I'm actually getting this question a couple of times. Can you clarify the top pick of Storyline 1 versus Storyline 1 versus Storyline 2 for mobile and specifically Android? So that's a really good question. Storyline 1 versus Storyline 2, essentially the end product is the same. So the end product really doesn't look that drastically different. You know, honestly, upgrading something from 1 to 2, you don't really notice it. What you do notice that they've done in Storyline 2 is they've added a lot of compatibility for Droid. So Droid is something that Articulate only started supporting about, I want to say, 2-3 months ago. and it's within there, so they just put out the app 2 or 3 months ago as well for Droid. One of the biggest benefits that they did from a Storyline 2 perspective is a lot of the things that you used to have to custom code, you no longer have to custom code. So they have an easy-to-use, intuitive interface where you're choosing things from drop-down menus, and they've increased the ability to cut and paste as well for those codes. So things that you used to have to very tediously code for each screen, you don't have to do that anymore. You can make those consistent, and you can cut and paste those. They've also added a lot more customization, things that used to be like these button and these hoverovers that you were able to add. They've added a lot of customization to that. So they're starting to get really flexible in the design. The difference between Articulate Presenter and Articulate Storyline, the best example that I can give you is where you have those engage elements that are pretty set in stone in Presenter. Storyline actually lets you create your own, so it gives you kind of all the pieces that you need to be able to put those together. Another question we had was, only one of the authoring tools you cited leverages the responsive web design. Do you not think that it's important consideration creating flexible and adaptive content that's optimized for different display sizes? I absolutely do. You know, creating the responsive web design, and for those of you who aren't aware of what that is, that means that, you know, depending on how you open up the screen, you know, if you're on a portrait, it's going to open up in portrait. If you're on a mobile, it's going to convert it to, if you've ever been on a web page and it goes to like the mobile site where it starts to streamline it and make it something that's easily accessible on a mobile. Whenever that's possible, I do think that that's the best approach to do. The challenge is that, again, like the user said, a lot of companies aren't really doing that. It's for the out-of-the-box solutions. A lot of that has to be customized, which is inherent from an excessive editability perspective becomes a problem. So a lot of the responsive web designs that I've seen are things that have to be customized and things that then become a challenge to edit. So they're not really the out-of-the-box solution that a lot of people really need to be able to do for sustainability. Next question was Articulate the best rated platform for developing e-learning? You know, I think that there is no quote-unquote best. You know, the examples that we gave here are based on our experiences. You know, we've tried all the different platforms. We're the ones who wind up having to troubleshoot a lot of the different problems as we start using the different platforms. So this is just based on our experience. You know, the ones that we've seen our customers be very successful with in the past. You know, what I think our go-to used to be was Flash, and, you know, now with iOS it becomes harder and harder to develop things in Flash and have them be able to be used across the board. And Articulate seems to be the one who's really risen to the table and been able to produce something. Now, that being said, Adobe and Lectora are definitely coming up there too. So the latest Adobe Presenter is much, much closer to where it needs to be from our perspective and seems to be much more mobile compliant than it was in the past. And let's see. We are getting a lot of questions in the Q&A. So what is the best tool for rapid development? Is this the same list? It really is. So most of these tools are rapid development. If I can just go back to the slides that talk about the different tools. So I would say that Articulate Presenter is probably more of your rapid development tool. Articulate Storyline, it is and it isn't. So it still uses slide templates, but there is it's a lot more custom. So you're developing a lot of things on the screen. I think it changes the way that you do your design. So for example, when we're using Articulate Storyline, we don't necessarily storyboard outside of Storyline anymore. It becomes just a redundant task to try and storyboard outside of Storyline and then have to recreate it in Storyline. So it changes the way that you do design to make that more of a rapid development tool. As we look at some of the other options, Adobe Presenter, that is definitely a rapid development tool, so that one is also PowerPoint-based. Captivate is a little bit tricky. The latest version of Captivate actually feels a lot more like Flash. And Lectora is actually PowerPoint-based as well, but that is a straight HTML solution. So that can be, you know, you do have to have a little bit of HTML finesse in our experience to be really successful with Lectora. It's, you know, it's definitely possible. It's definitely something that I've seen organizations be successful with, but it is a little bit more challenging than some of the other solutions. So another person just asked what's my opinion of Captivate 8. Like I said, Captivate 8 is a very powerful tool. The source files are very, very large, so that can be problematic from a file sharing and file storage perspective. It produces a very robust solution, but again, it has a lot of the features and it looks and feels a lot more like Flash than it used to. So you have more of the robust timeline, you have more of the layers than you used to. So, from our development team's perspective, they're very comfortable in it, but they're also very comfortable in Flash. When you talk to our design team and your development team, the tool that they're consistently all okay with is the Articulate Suite. They all seem to think that it's a really convenient tool for everybody to use, and we can kind of bend and flex across roles with that. We are running short on time. So one question that we have is if we've already have a mobile app and it has caused the communication confusion that you've described, how can we write it in and use it appropriately? So the best thing to do from that perspective, and a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of people in their organizations have fallen prey to that. Everybody wanted to go mobile, and it seems like mobile came out, and then all of a sudden, everybody has their mobile device, and everybody's looking to have content on their mobile device, and organizations just could not make decisions fast enough to be able to meet the needs of their learners. There was nothing that organizations could do. It feels like it happened night and day. The best thing that you can do is to start to pull in that guidance. Starting to communicate a strategy, starting to put a firm stance, and then working with the apps that are out there to keep the apps that are appropriate, remove or decommission the apps that aren't appropriate, so that your learners can have a consistent viewpoint. Again, this would be a great opportunity to use some hallmark programs, some wide-reaching programs, some programs that are across the enterprise to really stretch and communicate